I never imagined that a single moment could divide my life into two completely different worlds. The one I used to know and the one I would have to learn to live with. The day the doctor looked at me with heavy eyes and told me I had no other choice but to amputate my leg, I felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath me. It was not just flesh and bone that I was losing, it was a part of my identity, a piece of the life I once believed was permanent. His words echoed in my ears again and again, until I could hardly breathe. The room seemed to shrink, the walls pressing in closer, while the air grew colder with each passing second. I stared at the doctor's lips moving, but all I could hear was a deafening silence, as though the world itself had stopped. My heart pounded so loud it felt like thunder inside my chest, and for a moment I thought I might collapse right there on the hospital floor. I wanted to scream, to beg for another answer, but no words left my mouth. All I could do was sit there, frozen, while 1,000 questions crashed in my head. The cruel irony was that it had all started with something so small. A fall, a wound I thought would heal with time. I ignored the pain, convinced that I was stronger than whatever my body tried to tell me. But infections do not listen to pride, and by the time I sought help, the damage had already spread too far. The doctors explained how the infection was poisoning my body, creeping silently through tissues and blood. Saving the leg was no longer an option. Saving my life, however, still was, if I agreed to let them take it. That night, alone in a hospital bed, I felt the weight of every decision I had ever made. The machines around me beeped steadily, their sounds both comforting and cruel. Each beep reminded me I was alive, but also that I was trapped in a body that had betrayed me. The sterile scent of disinfectant clung to the air, and I hated it. I hated the brightness of the lights, the softness of the pillows, even the way the blanket felt against my skin. Everything seemed foreign, wrong, unbearable. I tried to close my eyes and escape into sleep, but my thoughts refused to let me rest. Memories of running through fields as a child, of climbing trees and falling down only to rise again, flooded my mind. Back then, my legs were my freedom, my wings. Now, the thought of losing one filled me with grief so raw I felt it cut deeper than the scalpel ever could. I gripped the sheets with trembling hands, fighting back tears, ashamed of how helpless I felt. The nurses checked on me often, speaking gently, their kindness brushing against my anger like fragile paper against fire. I appreciated their compassion, but I didn't want it. I didn't want pity or soft words, or promises that life would go on. I wanted the impossible, to turn back time, to stop this nightmare before it began. Their footsteps faded each time they left, leaving me to drown again in silence. The hospital, though filled with people, had never felt so lonely. Morning came too soon, carrying with it the dreadful reality that surgery was no longer days away but hours. The surgeon entered with a calmness I could not share. His voice was steady, explaining the risks, the procedure, the recovery. I nodded along, though none of it felt real. He might as well have been describing a stranger's operation, not mine. Inside I was screaming, "This can't be happening. This isn't my life." Yet it was. When they wheeled me toward the operating room, every detail burned into my memory. The cold touch of the metal rails, the flicker of fluorescent lights above me, the sterile corridor that stretched endlessly like a tunnel toward my fate. My body trembled, and I tried to grip the blanket as if it could anchor me to the life I was losing. I wanted to be brave, but fear gripped me so tightly that my chest ached. I thought of my family, of the people who loved me, and wondered how they would see me afterward. Would I still be the same person to them? Or just a broken version of who I used to be? As the anesthesia mask lowered toward my face, I panicked, trying to pull away, desperate for one more breath of freedom before everything changed. My mind filled with flashes of the past. Sunlight in my childhood home, laughter of friends, the sound of my father's voice calling me strong. I held on to those images with everything I had, clinging to them as the darkness began to swallow me. There was a moment just before I slipped under when I made myself a promise, that if I woke up, I would not let this define the end of me. My body might change, but my spirit could not be cut away. I whispered those words inside my mind, a vow that I hoped would carry me through whatever was waiting on the other side. And then silence. The kind of silence that is heavy and absolute, where the world seems to pause. My body surrendered to the drugs, but my thoughts traveled somewhere else entirely. It was as if my life was unraveling in front of me, thread by thread, inviting me to look back at everything I had been before this moment. It was in that darkness, somewhere between fear and surrender, that my memories began to surface. Childhood images painted themselves before me with vivid clarity. A younger version of myself running barefoot across fields, laughter spilling from my lips as though the world held no danger. I realized then that to move forward I first had to look back. to retrace the steps of the life I once lived, the choices I had made, and the moments that had shaped me.
We tell emotional and inspiring stories about life's toughest battles, moments of illness, struggle, recovery, love, and loss. Not every story has a happy ending, but each one carries a powerful message of strength, hope, and humanity. Subscribe to discover moving stories that touch the heart and stay with you forever.
And so, as I drifted further into unconsciousness, I allowed myself to walk once more through the corridors of my past. Each step, each memory became a lantern guiding me through the storm. If I was going to lose part of myself, I needed to understand all the parts that had built me in the first place. My story, I knew, was far from over. The earliest memory I can clearly recall is the warmth of sunlight pouring through thin curtains in the small house where I was born. Mornings always smelled of fresh bread, baked by my mother before the rest of us even opened our eyes. I would hear her humming softly, a melody that promised comfort before the day began. Those sounds and scents wrapped around me like a blanket, making me believe the world was a safe and endless place. Childhood in those first years felt like a garden where nothing bad could ever grow. I was a restless child, always chasing movement, as if my legs were created solely for running and climbing. Every tree in our neighborhood carried my fingerprints, every rooftop had heard my laughter echoing through the air. Scraped knees were my constant companions, yet I wore those wounds like medals of victory. My mother sighed each time I came home bleeding, but her eyes betrayed a quiet pride. She knew I was alive in the purest sense, reckless but unafraid. My father, in contrast, was a man of quiet strength. He worked with his hands, often returning home with the scent of wood and iron clinging to his clothes. Though his voice was stern, I admired the way his smile softened the weight he carried. He was the one who taught me how to ride a bicycle, running behind me with one hand steady on the seat. The day I pedaled forward without him holding me was the day I first understood what freedom felt like. That memory still burns bright in me. Our neighborhood was small, made up of narrow streets where children's voices echoed long into the night. We invented games out of nothing. Stones became treasures, sticks turned into swords. The pavement burned under our bare feet in the summer sun, but we never cared. We chased each other, laughed until our lungs ached, and believed that joy was endless. Those games were our kingdoms, and for a time we truly were kings and queens. But even in a childhood filled with laughter, shadows sometimes slipped into the corners. At night, I often lay awake, listening to my parents whisper in the next room. Their voices sometimes rose into storms that rattled the fragile walls. I was too young to understand the reasons behind their arguments, but old enough to feel the unease crawling into my chest. It was my first lesson that happiness could crack, that love could tremble under the weight of silence. To escape, I often retreated to the old oak tree near our house. I would climb until the branches swayed beneath my weight, and there I would sit, watching the world below. From that height, the problems of adults seemed small and distant. The leaves whispered secrets in the wind, and I convinced myself they were talking only to me. It was in that solitude that I discovered how comforting it was to dream, to imagine a life where worries couldn't reach me. School was another stage where I both stumbled and soared. I wasn't the best student, often distracted by thoughts that had nothing to do with the chalkboard in front of me. But when I focused, I surprised even myself with what I could achieve. My teachers sometimes scolded me, yet others encouraged me, insisting that I had a spark worth nurturing. I didn't fully understand what they meant back then, but their words stayed tucked inside me, waiting for the right time to bloom. Friends played an equally powerful role in shaping who I became. We were inseparable, bound by secrets and promises whispered under the stars. We swore we would never change, that we would grow old together and always protect each other. Childhood made such vows feel eternal. It never occurred to us that time would scatter us, that life would pull us in different directions. Back then, the bond felt unbreakable, and that belief gave me strength. Summers were the golden hours of my youth. Long days filled with river swims, watermelon slices dripping down our chins, and fireflies lighting up the night sky. I can still feel the rush of water against my skin, the laughter echoing through the valley, the joy of being surrounded by people who knew me better than anyone else. Those summers felt infinite, and for many years, I measured happiness by those memories alone. Of course, childhood was not always painted in gold. I remember the sting of exclusion, the times I wasn't chosen for a game, the moments I felt invisible even in a crowd. Children can be cruel without realizing it, and their careless words often sank deeper than any scrape on my knees. Still, each hurt shaped me, teaching me empathy long before I knew what the word meant. It taught me that wounds heal, but the lessons they leave remain. Even with the shadows, My childhood was a treasure chest I could open whenever the present felt too heavy. Each memory was a gem, polished with time, glowing brighter the further I moved from it. When I think about those days now, I realize how much I took them for granted. I never thought there would come a time when I couldn't run freely or climb trees without fear. Back then, my legs were simply part of me, unshakable, eternal. Now, lying in a hospital bed, I sometimes close my eyes and walk again through those narrow streets. I hear my mother's humming, feel my father's hand steadying my bicycle, smell the warm bread that welcomed each new day. The past feels close enough to touch, even though it belongs to another life entirely. That closeness both comforts me and pierces me, reminding me of what I once had and what I am about to lose. Childhood taught me joy, resilience, and the first fragile truths about love and pain. It was a time of innocence, yet also the beginning of understanding. And though I didn't know it then, those early experiences laid the foundation for everything I would later endure. They gave me memories strong enough to hold on to when reality threatened to break me. As I prepare to step deeper into my past, I carry those echoes of childhood with me like a lantern. They illuminate not only who I was, but who I still am beneath the fear and the scars. They remind me that even when life takes something from us, it cannot erase the beginnings that shaped our souls. And for me, that truth is the one thing no blade, no surgeon, and no tragedy can amputate. Adolescence arrived like a storm I wasn't prepared for, fierce and unpredictable, pulling me into a world where boundaries felt like chains I needed to break. I craved freedom, independence, and the taste of danger, even if I didn't fully understand the cost. My body was restless, my mind hungry for experiences I couldn't name. Every rule seemed made to be tested, every warning an invitation to do the opposite. I was no longer the child who climbed trees, I had become someone who wanted to climb out of childhood itself. My friends and I lived as though the nights belonged only to us. We sneaked out of our houses when the world was asleep, riding bicycles under flickering streetlights that cast our shadows long and thin across the pavement. Our laughter echoed in the silence, daring the night to challenge us. We felt invincible, like kings of empty roads, reckless rulers of a kingdom no one else could see. Looking back now, I marvel at how close we often came to disaster without realizing it. Risk became a language we spoke fluently. We raced each other down steep hills, ignoring the burns and bruises that came after. We climbed walls higher than we could safely descend, shouted from rooftops, and challenged each other to dares that left our hearts pounding. It wasn't about proving ourselves to others as much as it was about feeling alive. Pain was temporary, adrenaline eternal, or so we believed. My scars became stories, each one retold with laughter as if danger was our friend. School, however, was a different battlefield. I didn't shine there, not in the way my parents hoped I would. My mind wandered constantly, chasing dreams more exciting than the words on the blackboard. I struggled with discipline, relying too much on last-minute efforts to pass. Teachers saw my distractions as weakness, though a few noticed something else, a spark of determination buried under layers of rebellion. I wanted to prove myself, but I didn't yet know how. At the same time, emotions I couldn't control began to stir. My first brush with love was clumsy and confusing, a mixture of hope and humiliation. I remember the way my chest tightened at a smile, the thrill of stolen glances, and the crushing weight of rejection when I wasn't enough. That heartbreak, though small compared to the storms ahead, felt like the end of the world back then. It was the first time I realized the human heart could break without leaving visible wounds. Despite the chaos, there were moments of tenderness I still treasure. Sitting on the rooftop with friends, we shared secrets under the stars, promising we would never change. We talked about dreams that stretched far beyond the horizon, swearing we would conquer the world together. In those moments, I felt seen, understood, and part of something larger than myself. Youth gave us the illusion of eternity, and for a while we believed it. But rebellion often came with consequences. I remember the sting of my father's disappointment when he discovered the trouble I had gotten into. His silence was worse than his anger, a silence heavy with unspoken fears. My mother tried to protect me, her voice softer but her worry just as sharp. At the time, I thought they didn't understand me. Now I see they feared losing me to the recklessness that consumed me. There were close calls too, nights when one wrong step could have ended everything. Once, after a reckless race down a wet road, I skidded and crashed, my body scraping across gravel. I lay there bleeding, my heart hammering, realizing how fragile my so-called invincibility truly was. My friends laughed nervously, but I saw fear in their eyes, the kind that comes when you glimpse the edge of mortality. It should have been a wake-up call, yet I still kept running toward danger. The pressure to fit in also weighed heavily on me. I wanted to be fearless, to match the bravado of those around me. But late at night, when I was alone, doubts gnawed at me. I questioned whether I was strong or just reckless, brave or simply foolish. My reflection often looked like a stranger, someone caught between the innocence of childhood and the demands of adulthood. I was still searching for who I truly was. Music became my refuge during those years. I would put on headphones and drown in songs that seemed to understand me better than anyone else. Lyrics became my secret diary, carrying feelings I couldn't put into words. With music, I felt less alone, as if someone somewhere had walked the same path and survived. It gave me courage to keep going even when I felt lost in the noise of my own confusion. Yet, not all memories from those years are drenched in chaos. There were quiet afternoons spent watching the sky change colors, moments when laughter with friends was pure and untainted by risk. I remember the thrill of small victories, passing an exam I thought I would fail, earning my father's rare smile, or catching the eye of someone I secretly admired. Those moments, though fleeting, reminded me that life was more than just chasing adrenaline. Still, my teenage years were marked by contradiction. I wanted to be free, yet feared the loneliness that freedom sometimes brought. I wanted to be brave, yet I often hid behind masks of confidence I didn't feel. I wanted to matter, but I didn't know how to prove it. Each day felt like a battle between who I was and who I thought I needed to be. And in that struggle, I grew without realizing it. Looking back now, I see those reckless years as a bridge between innocence and responsibility. They shaped me in ways I couldn't have understood at the time. The scars I carried weren't just physical. They were reminders of lessons hidden beneath mistakes. They taught me that life is fragile, that choices carve deep paths, and that freedom always comes with a cost. As I lie here, remembering the boy I once was, I ache for his energy, his fearlessness, and even his foolishness. He didn't know how precious every step was, how fleeting health and strength could be. If only he had known, perhaps he would have run differently. Or maybe not. Maybe his recklessness was the very fire that prepared me for the storms yet to come. Adulthood crept into my life quietly, without fanfare, but its weight was undeniable. One day I was a teenager sneaking out at night, and the next I was expected to shoulder responsibilities that felt far too heavy. Bills, expectations, and choices began to pile up, demanding more than I thought I could give. For the first time, I realized that freedom came with a price tag, one that often left me breathless. It was no longer about chasing thrills, it was about surviving. My first job was humbling. I walked into that workplace with confidence, believing I was ready to conquer the world. But reality was harsher than any teacher had ever been. Long hours, difficult supervisors, and endless mistakes quickly reminded me that I was still learning. I stumbled often, embarrassed by my inexperience, but I also discovered resilience buried deep inside me. Each failure pushed me harder to prove that I could rise again. Money was always short and dreams felt distant. I wanted so much, to travel, to study further, to become someone others would admire, but life demanded sacrifices. Rent, food, and bills came first, leaving little room for ambition. Still, I clung to small victories like saving a few extra coins or managing to last another week without borrowing. Those tiny triumphs became sparks of hope, flickering against the weight of reality. Love also entered my life with both promise and pain. I remember the rush of holding someone's hand for the first time as an adult, the way it felt like electricity running through my veins. But I also remember the heartbreak when that love faded, leaving me hollow and questioning my worth. Relationships taught me that the human heart was fragile, and that sometimes the greatest lessons come not from being loved, but from surviving its absence. Failure became a teacher I couldn't escape. There were projects I poured myself into that collapsed before they could stand. There were jobs I lost, friendships I ruined, opportunities one missed because of fear. Each time I thought the world was ending, but it never did. Instead, the pain hardened into wisdom, and the mistakes carved paths toward strength. Slowly, I began to understand that failing didn't mean I was broken. It meant I was still trying. My parents, once the giants of my world, grew older during these years. Watching them struggle with time's grip shook me in ways I hadn't expected. My father's hands, once steady and strong, trembled when he tried to fix things around the house. My mother's hair turned silver, her voice softer than before. It was then that I realized life was not only about building my future but also about honoring the past. I often felt torn between responsibility and ambition. Part of me wanted to chase dreams that burned bright inside, while another part feared abandoning those who needed me. I carried guilt on my shoulders, guilt for not being enough, for failing to give back all that had been given to me. That guilt pushed me forward but also weighed me down, like an anchor dragging behind me no matter how fast I tried to run. During those years, I discovered how cruel comparison could be. Friends moved ahead, better jobs, bigger houses, more stable lives. I smiled at their successes, but inside I wrestled with jealousy and doubt. Why wasn't I enough? Why did every step forward feel like 2 steps back? I tried to hide those feelings, but they consumed me in the quiet hours of the night, when the world was asleep and only my thoughts remained awake. Yet even in the midst of struggle, there were glimpses of joy. I remember nights spent laughing with friends over cheap food, the kind of laughter that made stomachs ache and worries disappear. I remember moments of pride when I managed to help my family, even in small ways, reminding myself that effort mattered as much as results. Those moments didn't erase the failures, but they softened them, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. My body, strong in youth, began to remind me it had limits. Accidents, illnesses, and exhaustion piled up, each one leaving a mark I could no longer ignore. It wasn't yet the tragedy that would later take my leg, but it was the beginning of understanding how fragile flesh truly is. I realized that strength was not infinite, and that ignoring pain only gave it room to grow stronger. That truth, though bitter, stayed with me. Dreams shifted as reality shaped them. I once wanted to conquer the world, but slowly I learned to aim smaller. Stability, safety, moments of peace. I began to understand that life was not always about grand victories, but about finding meaning in small, quiet successes. A roof over my head, food on the table, and someone to share it with. Those became my new dreams, and I held them close even when everything else felt uncertain. Failure still haunted me, but it no longer crushed me. Instead, it became a mirror, forcing me to confront the person I was becoming. Each mistake carved lessons I couldn't have learned otherwise. Each disappointment reshaped me, stripping away arrogance and replacing it with humility. In losing, I was strangely winning, gaining the strength to endure what life had yet to throw at me. Looking back now, I see those years as both painful and necessary. They weren't filled with the reckless laughter of youth or the security of later wisdom, but with the raw struggle of becoming. They were the years when I learned to stand on unsteady ground, when I discovered that survival itself was a victory. The bruises of those times became the armor I still wear today. And though those years were heavy with failure, they also planted seeds of resilience. Seeds that would later bloom when the storms grew darker, when illness and loss would demand everything from me. If I hadn't walked through the fire of those first failures, I don't know if I would have had the strength to face what came next. Dreams may have faltered, but they left me with something stronger than success: endurance. Love arrived like a sudden storm, unexpected and intense, shaking the foundations of everything I thought I knew about myself. I met her on a quiet evening, her laughter spilling into the room like sunlight breaking through clouds. From that moment, the world seemed sharper, brighter, and more fragile. Every glance, every touch, carried a weight I hadn't anticipated. I was both exhilarated and terrified of losing the beauty I had just found. Our early days were filled with magic, simple yet profound. We walked for hours, talked until our throats burned, shared secrets we had never told anyone else. Every smile from her felt like a lifeline, every embrace a fortress against the outside world. In her presence, I felt whole, as if my past struggles had led me exactly to this moment. I thought I had finally discovered something worth holding on to forever. But life has always had other plans. Illness crept silently into my body, a slow, relentless thief of strength. At first, I ignored the symptoms, hoping they would pass like a storm. Yet, the pain intensified, my energy waned, and my body betrayed me in ways I couldn't control. The vibrant life I had shared with her began to fade, replaced by hospital visits, tests, and the sterile scent of despair. She stood by me through every moment, her hands warm against my cold skin, her eyes never leaving mine. But I could see the worry behind her courage, the fear she tried desperately to hide. Love, I realized, is not just the magic of connection. It is endurance, patience, and the willingness to stay even when the world seems to collapse. Her presence was my anchor, yet I couldn't help feeling like I was dragging her into my storm. The diagnosis was brutal, shaking me to my core. The infection in my leg had grown beyond repair. The word, amputation, echoed in my mind like a verdict, slicing through my thoughts and my heart. I thought of our plans, our dreams, and I felt the unbearable weight of what this would mean. I wanted to scream, to fight, to beg the universe for mercy, but I had no power over what was coming. Surgery loomed over us like a dark shadow. I tried to remain brave for her, to show that I could endure anything. But inside, I was unraveling, my fears colliding with guilt and sorrow. I hated that she had to witness my pain, that the life we had imagined together was now tangled with hospital rooms and the scent of antiseptic. Love had become a test of endurance neither of us had asked for. Recovery was grueling. Pain became a constant companion, every step a reminder of what I had lost. I felt a profound emptiness in my body and soul, and yet her hand was always there, holding mine through the darkest moments. Some nights I would wake from dreams of running and climbing, only to realize I could never do so the way I once had. Those dreams, once a source of joy, now mocked me with their impossibility. During those long nights, I reflected on the choices I had made, the accidents I had ignored, and the reckless years that had brought me here. Regret gnawed at me, but I could not let it consume the moments of love I still had. Every smile she gave me, every whispered word of encouragement, reminded me that even broken, life could still hold beauty. Loss wasn't only physical, it was also emotional. I grieved the life I thought I would have, the body I once took for granted, and the freedom I had believed eternal. Yet, in grieving I found small victories. I discovered the capacity to accept my vulnerability, to admit fear, and to rely on the support of someone who loved me unconditionally. That realization, though painful, became a cornerstone of my resilience. I learned that turning points often come disguised as tragedies. The moment I understood I could survive this loss, both of my leg and the life I had imagined, was when I truly began to live again. Love had not abandoned me nor had hope. It had transformed, becoming quieter but infinitely stronger, rooted in reality instead of fantasy. I realized that survival was not just physical. It was emotional, spiritual, and profoundly human. There were days when tears came unbidden, and nights when doubt threatened to swallow me whole. Yet, every morning I woke to her presence, to the soft light of dawn spilling through the curtains, and I found the courage to face another day. Pain was still there, but so was love, and in that balance I discovered a strange peace. Perhaps this was what it meant to endure life fully, accepting both grief and grace simultaneously. As time passed, I began to reclaim pieces of myself. I learned to move in new ways, to navigate spaces differently, to find strength in adaptation. The world felt sharper, yet more intimate. Every step was a reminder of survival, every task a triumph over despair. I started seeing possibilities where once I had only seen limitations, and slowly life became mine to shape once again. Through love, loss, and the painful turning points, I realized something vital. The human spirit is infinitely resilient. Even when our bodies betray us, even when life seems to steal everything we hold dear, there is a part of us that refuses to break. That part carries memory, courage, and hope, anchoring us in the storm. I discovered that endurance itself could be a form of triumph. And so, as I lay in that hospital bed, remembering the hand that had held me through everything, I understood the lesson. Love does not guarantee safety or freedom, but it teaches survival, strength, and the courage to keep walking forward. The storms of life may take our legs, our health, or our dreams, but they cannot touch the part of us that continues to hope, to endure, and to love. Lying in the hospital bed, I found myself drifting into reflection, my mind a vast gallery of memories both sweet and bitter. Each recollection carried its own weight, a fragment of the life I had lived, the choices I had made, and the roads I had walked. The past no longer felt distant. It hovered around me, tangible and vivid, almost demanding my attention. I realized that these memories were the threads that held my identity together, even as my body betrayed me. I recalled the simplest joys, mornings spent drinking coffee with my father, the warmth of sunlight on my mother's face, the sound of rain against the roof of our old home. These small moments, often overlooked, seemed monumental now. I understood how much they had shaped my capacity for gratitude, for noticing beauty in fleeting things. Even pain could not diminish their glow. They were anchors, grounding me in the essence of who I was. Friends from long ago appeared in my mind, their faces etched in clarity as if I had just seen them yesterday. I remembered the laughter that had carried me through lonely days, the silent support during times of despair. Some friendships had faded with time, others had ended abruptly, leaving wounds that still ached. Yet each connection had taught me lessons about loyalty, trust, and the fragility of human bonds. I could feel their influence even years later, like gentle hands guiding me forward. I wandered through memories of my reckless youth, remembering the thrill of risk and the foolish courage that defined those years. Accidents, near misses, and moments of daring still sent shivers down my spine. I realized how much those experiences had built resilience in me, though at the cost of fear I would carry forever. Recklessness had been my teacher, shaping my instincts and daring me to face life's uncertainties, preparing me unknowingly for the trials ahead. Love lingered in memory, bright and bittersweet. I thought of her hands, her laughter, the way she had seen me at my most vulnerable and still chosen to stay. The pain of nearly losing her, of feeling my life slip through my fingers, left scars that were not physical but deep in my soul. Yet I understood now that love had strengthened me, teaching me endurance, empathy, and courage beyond the superficial. It was a memory I could never relinquish, a beacon in darkness. I thought of failures, each one a vivid lesson etched in my mind. Jobs lost, opportunities missed, projects that collapsed. All of it shaped me. I could see the moments I had been stubborn, proud, or afraid, and I allowed myself to forgive my younger self. Reflection was not only about reliving moments but understanding them, and in doing so, reclaiming the wisdom they contained. Every misstep had contributed to the person I had become. My body, once so reliable, had reminded me of mortality in sharp, unforgiving ways. I could not ignore the pain, the weakness, and the looming shadow of illness. But memory also reminded me of strength, of all the times I had overcome obstacles, physically and emotionally. The past became a map of resilience, a record that told me survival was possible, even when the present seemed bleak. I remembered milestones that had seemed insignificant at the time. Finishing a difficult project, earning praise I had thought undeserved, small personal victories. Those moments, once fleeting, now felt monumental. They were proof that I could endure and achieve, that the accumulation of small triumphs mattered as much as grand successes. Life's meaning often lived in these quiet achievements rather than in spectacular moments. Childhood, too, came back to me with vivid clarity. The games, the endless streets, the trees I climbed, all reminded me of a life lived without fear of losing what was then eternal. Those memories became treasures, even more precious now that freedom and mobility were no longer guaranteed. They reminded me that joy had once been simple, and that simplicity was something I could carry forward even in altered circumstances. Reflection also brought regret. I mourned moments wasted, harsh words spoken, and opportunities one had allowed to slip away. I faced the truth that life was not always fair, and that some pain was unavoidable. Yet even regret had value, teaching humility, acceptance, and the importance of intentional living. Each painful memory became a lesson etched into my consciousness, a guide for choices I still had the power to make. I realized that memory was not static. It was alive, shaped by emotion, perspective, and passage of time. Moments that had seemed painful could now offer wisdom, and memories that were joyful could still inspire hope. In this realization, I discovered a power I had never considered: the ability to reinterpret the past and use it as fuel for the present. Memory itself became a form of survival. As I lingered in reflection, I found gratitude emerging in unexpected places. Gratitude for family, for love, for lessons learned the hard way, and even for the pain that had taught me resilience. Each memory became a gift, a reminder that life, despite its cruelty, also offered beauty, connection, and meaning. This awareness, fragile but persistent, gave me a sense of peace I had not felt in years. I saw the continuity of my life, threads weaving together childhood, youth, love, loss, and failure into a complex tapestry. Every experience, joyful or painful, was connected, forming a story that was uniquely mine. Reflection allowed me to step back and recognize the pattern, the lessons hidden in the chaos. It gave me a perspective that transcended fear, illness, and physical limitation. Finally, I understood that memory and reflection were not just exercises in nostalgia, they were tools for survival. By revisiting my past, I could draw strength, clarity, and courage. I could honor what I had lived, learn from what I had endured, and prepare for what lay ahead. In that moment, I realized that even in a body weakened by circumstance, my mind remained a fortress, fortified by every memory I carried. The day of the accident started like any other, ordinary and unremarkable, but it ended as the day life changed forever. One misstep, one moment of carelessness, and my world tilted violently. Pain exploded through my leg, raw and unrelenting, as I realized I couldn't move it properly. Fear surged through me, twisting with disbelief. I knew immediately that nothing would ever be the same. Paramedics arrived quickly, their voices calm but urgent, grounding me even as panic threatened to take over. The ride to the hospital was a blur of sirens and shaking asphalt. I clutched my leg, each jolt sending waves of agony through my body. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall, determined to remain conscious, aware, and somehow in control. My mind spun through memories, holding on desperately to familiarity amid chaos. Doctors spoke in rapid, clinical tones, words I barely understood. Infection had spread, tissue was damaged beyond repair, and amputation was unavoidable. My heart dropped, a cold void opening in my chest. I wanted to scream, bargain, plead for another option, but deep down I knew there was none. The gravity of survival collided with the certainty of loss, and I felt the weight of mortality more intensely than ever before. Surgery was a haze of anesthesia and antiseptic, the sterile smell clinging to my senses. I drifted in and out of consciousness, fragments of my life playing across my mind like a film. I saw my childhood again, reckless teenage years, love and failures, every memory sharpened by the fear of what was to come. The line between life and death blurred, and I felt both terrified and oddly serene, as if accepting my fragility had become a strange comfort. When I awoke, the absence was immediate. One leg was gone, replaced by a stark, sterile emptiness. Pain throbbed, a relentless reminder of what had been taken. The room felt smaller, the walls closer, the world suddenly hostile in its indifference. I felt fear, grief, and anger all at once crashing over me like waves. Yet beneath it all, a spark of determination flickered, fragile but persistent. Recovery was brutal, both physically and emotionally. Every movement was a battle, every step an achievement measured in inches. The simplest tasks became monumental, and I learned patience I had never possessed. Nights were the hardest, silent, lonely, haunted by dreams of running and climbing that I could no longer achieve. Yet with every dawn, I pushed myself further, discovering reservoirs of strength I hadn't known existed. Therapy became my new reality, a relentless regimen of exercises, pain, and small victories. The first time I stood on one leg, supported by crutches, tears streamed down my face. It was a victory not celebrated by others, but it was monumental to me. Each improvement, each incremental step became proof that life could continue, that loss did not mean the end of living. I clung to that hope fiercely. Friends and family rallied around me, their support unwavering even when my own frustration boiled over. I saw the love reflected in their eyes, the sacrifices they made without complaint. In those moments, I realized that survival was never solitary, it was shared. Their presence became a lifeline, a reminder that even broken, I was not alone. Pain, both physical and emotional, taught me humility. I could no longer take mobility, health, or strength for granted. Every day was a negotiation with my body, a careful balance between limits and possibilities. Anger and despair were frequent companions, but I learned to channel them into determination. The body may be fragile, but the will can remain unbroken. Adjusting to a new reality forced me to redefine my life. Activities I once took for granted became challenges, yet with each conquered obstacle, I reclaimed a fragment of independence. I learned to navigate stairs, drive adapted vehicles, and perform tasks I had never imagined doing with one leg. It was a daily confrontation with limitations, yet each triumph reaffirmed the truth that life, even altered, was still worth living. Sleep often brought nightmares, memories of the accident mingling with fears of the future. Waking to the reality of my changed body was sometimes unbearable. Yet over time, the nightmares softened, replaced by determination and planning. I began to visualize a life beyond pain, beyond limitations, one shaped by courage rather than fear. Hope, fragile but persistent, became my anchor. Every day I reminded myself of the progress I had made, the support I had, and the inner strength I had unearthed. I realized that life's value did not lie solely in what was lost, but in what could still be built, step by painstaking step. Survival was more than breathing, it was reclaiming purpose, redefining identity, and learning to endure. Even in moments of despair, I discovered gratitude. Gratitude for the life that remained, for hands that held mine, for hearts that refused to abandon me. Loss had reshaped me, but it had not destroyed me. In fact, it had revealed a resilience deeper than I had ever known, a courage forged in pain, tempered by love, and strengthened by necessity. As I reflected on the fall, the battle, and the slow climb back, I understood something profound. Survival is not simply the absence of death. It is the presence of courage, the determination to adapt, and the willingness to keep moving forward despite devastation. Life, even broken, is still life, and within it lies the power to endure, to love, and to find meaning once more. Months turned into a year, and slowly I began to rebuild not only my body but my life. Each step, though cautious and deliberate, became a declaration that I was still here, still breathing, and still capable of more than I had imagined. The scars, both visible and hidden, became badges of survival, reminders of battles fought and endured. I learned that healing was not linear, it was a mosaic of small victories and persistent effort. Physical therapy became a ritual, a daily confrontation with limitations. At first, progress was agonizingly slow, each movement testing both patience and pain tolerance. Yet, over time, my muscles grew stronger, my balance improved, and the impossible began to feel achievable. I discovered that perseverance is often louder than talent, and courage is measured in inches rather than leaps. Emotionally, I had to confront loss in its rawest form. There were moments of despair, nights when I questioned whether life could ever feel whole again. But through reflection, I realized that completeness was not about returning to the old normal, it was about creating a new one. Acceptance became my ally, not resignation, but an understanding that life could still hold beauty despite devastation. Love remained a guiding light throughout recovery. She never wavered, never abandoned me, and in her loyalty I found strength I had never known. Together, we discovered that true love is less about perfection and more about resilience, patience, and commitment. Her presence reminded me that survival was not just physical endurance, but the nurturing of bonds that give life meaning. I returned to work gradually, adapting to new routines and responsibilities. The professional world, once intimidating, became a space to redefine myself. I discovered that competence is born from persistence and problem-solving, not invulnerability. My colleagues watched my transformation with quiet admiration, though I felt it most deeply within my own heart, where pride and relief intertwined. Socially, I rebuilt connections that had frayed under the weight of my illness and recovery. Friends who truly mattered stood by me, while superficial ties fell away. I learned to value depth over quantity, authenticity over appearances. Relationships became a reflection of mutual care, rather than obligation, and I cherished each person who walked this journey with me. Gradually, the physical limitations became manageable, though not forgotten. I learned to navigate spaces with prosthetics, crutches, and careful planning. Activities I once took for granted became new challenges, and yet, with each conquered obstacle, I reclaimed independence. The body that had betrayed me became a testament to resilience, a living proof that adaptation is possible. Mentally, I found clarity in reflection. I began journaling, recording lessons, gratitude, and moments of triumph. Writing became a therapy, a way to process emotion and solidify the resilience I had cultivated. Each entry reminded me that life's value lies not in the absence of suffering, but in the strength to confront it, to adapt, and to persist. Spiritually, I felt a transformation I could not articulate in words. The fear that once consumed me shifted into reverence for life itself, no matter its fragility. I learned to honor each breath, each heartbeat, each step as a miracle of survival. Mortality was no longer a shadow of dread but a teacher, urging me to cherish the present with intensity and gratitude. I began mentoring others who faced similar struggles, sharing my story and the lessons it carried. In helping them navigate pain and recovery, I discovered purpose beyond my own existence. Their resilience inspired me, reflecting back the courage I had nurtured within myself. Teaching became a way to honor my journey and ensure that suffering could be transformed into hope. The accident, the illness, the fall, though devastating, had also gifted me perspective. I understood now that life is not measured solely by what we achieve, but by how we endure, adapt, and love. Every struggle, every tear, every heartbeat of pain had strengthened me, forging a spirit that refused to surrender. I had learned that survival was an art of courage, patience, and relentless hope. Looking back, I realized that the moments I once feared losing, the freedom, the physical ability, the dreams, had been transformed. I had not regained what was gone, but I had discovered what truly mattered: resilience, love, connection, and meaning. Life's beauty does not lie in perfection, but in the strength to continue even when perfection is impossible. And finally, the lesson crystallized. Survival is not just about living, but about learning to embrace change, endure suffering, and grow from it. We are defined not by what we lose, but by how we rise after loss. Pain teaches, love sustains, and hope endures. Even broken, we are whole in the ways that truly matter. As I step forward each day, prosthetic in place, scars visible, heart full, I carry this truth. Life will challenge, wounds will deepen, and uncertainty will loom, but strength, courage, and love will always light the path. And in that path, I have found peace, purpose, and the profound knowledge that even in darkness, the human spirit can shine brilliantly.